we had a pretty good time until, I think, in September of 1942, 43, the Italian government capitulated.
This was your life, being chased, being gone through all these problems. That was it. That was your fate.
Comme a toujours dit mon père, la guerre, on me l'a imposée. Mais il y a plusieurs façons de faire la guerre. On peut la faire humainement.
Here, 1,000 Jewish men, women, children, elderly persons, assisted by Jewish organizations, protected by the Italian Army of Occupation, knew a respite until the 8th of September 1943, the day the hatred of the German occupier was unleashed. Curious situation, an army of occupation that protects a persecuted people in a country it occupies.
Quindi la domanda sorge spontanea: si tratta di una protezione, si tratta di salvataggio umanitario degli ebrei o si tratta di una politica di natura diversa?
June 1940, with the German victory over France assured, Italy declares war on France. After 4 days of fighting, the Italians occupy the city of Menton, partially destroyed, and a thin strip of land along the Alpine border.
La bella città mediterranea ritorna all'Italia.
Mussolini and Hitler met on the 18th of June, 1940. Mussolini said, rubbing his hands, we're going to take Nice, we're going to take Savoy, we're going to take Corsica. And Hitler said, no, no, not so fast. That would simply provoke the exile of the French government to Algiers or to London, and then we'd have to keep fighting them. But if we're smart, and Hitler was capable, still capable at that point of making intelligent political calculations, if we're smart, we'll give them a certain amount of leeway. We'll make it look as though the armistice is worth their while, and we won't have to work so hard to occupy them.
The armistice establishes a northern zone occupied by the Germans and a southern zone controlled by the Vichy government headed by Maréchal Pétain. Vichy also maintains a certain amount of control over the administration and the police in the northern zone.
There's a very widespread view that France was under the boot of the Nazis and that everything that happened in France from between 1940 and 1944 was the result of German pressure. The Germans had the power, the Germans did whatever they wanted, and that was quite true in 1944. In 1940, Vichy had some leeway. Vichy had its own anti-Jewish program.
For the Jews, discrimination and persecution begins, both in the northern and southern zones. Deportations start in March 1942. Most of the Jews living in France in 1940 have been living there for generations, but many are also recent refugees who fled anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe, the rise of Nazism in Germany, and the first German victories in Western Europe. Some refugees have already fled one or more countries before arriving in France. In the beginning of 1942, the scenario changes. The Allies land in North Africa, until then under the control of Vichy and the Axis countries. To prevent an Allied invasion, Germany and Italy then occupy the south of France. The Vichy administration remains in place despite the occupation forces. Some 140,000 Italian soldiers and officers occupy some 10 departments, an area stretching from Grenoble to Bandol, including the Alpes-Maritimes, Nice, the Côte d'Azur, and Monaco. Corsica is occupied by some 75,000 Italian soldiers, roughly one soldier for every 3 residents.
Au moment où la 4e armée occupe la Provence, la Corse et les Alpes du Sud, et même du Nord, il y a des Juifs en Italie qui sont discriminés, sinon persécutés.
En septembre 1937, Mussolini fait un voyage en Allemagne. Et ce voyage, à mon avis, joue un rôle décisif dans l'élaboration de la décision de l'antisémitisme d'État. Il revient très impressionné.
Less than a year later, on August 8, 1938, fascist propaganda launches an anti-Semitic, racist biweekly, The Defense of the Race. From September to November, the racial laws are adopted.
Lorsque sont adoptées ces lois raciales, qui sont des lois, donc ces lois anti-juives, parce que c'est essentiellement de cela qu'il s'agit, ce sont des lois d'exclusion qui vont très loin, qui sont extrêmement sévères et qui visent véritablement, c'est d'ailleurs l'un des slogans de la propagande, à séparer les juifs du restant de la population.
Quando dalla sera alla mattina si perse il lavoro, non si poté più andare a scuola, immediatamente avvenne una sorta di passaggio a una categoria inferiore, insomma. Si era più cittadini come gli altri, ma si apparteneva a una sorta di categoria, una serie B, insomma. Si era soggetti di storia, non più protagonisti di storia.
En revanche, il n'y a pas, de la part du régime, de volonté de susciter des phénomènes de violence physique, de pogrom.
Paradox. In France, the thousands of Jews who find refuge in the Italian zone will not be subject to the racial laws which apply in Italy. It will be the only time during the war, for 10 short months, that Jews will live unmolested in an occupied country. Thanks to Italian determination, they will not be delivered to the Nazis, despite pressure from the Vichy administration and the Germans. These documents, like many others, are the proof.
If the Italians now take the defense of the Jews of foreign nationality, the continuation of an anti-Jewish policy is, in our view, impossible. Signed, Dr. Knoen, SS Standartenführer.
À partir de l'occupation italienne, et surtout à partir du mois de mars 1943, quand on est assuré que dans la zone occupée par les Italiens, on ne sera pas remis aux Allemands, il y a un afflux qui se produit. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a une partie des Juifs de Marseille, qui eux sont occupés par les Allemands, qui vont franchir ce qu'on appelle la ligne de démarcation, c'est-à-dire Bandol, sur la côte, la frontière entre les Bouches-du-Rhône et le Var, pour venir s'installer dans les Alpes-Maritimes, et en particulier dans la région de Nice. Ce qui fait que, très rapidement, la communauté juive va grimper jusqu'à 20 000 en avril-mai 1943 et 22 000 en juin 1943. Bon, ensuite, ça sera encore plus.
We heard at that time that the Jews were safe in the Italian occupied zone, and my mother and I traveled by train to Nice, where we contacted the Jewish committee at Boulevard du Bouchage, and they provided us with documents saying that we had to report to a forced residence in Saint-Martin-Vésubie sometime in April 1943. We no longer had to be afraid to be arrested by the French police. We arrived in Saint-Martin-Vésubie, where there were many, many Jews standing, and these people were talking all kinds of languages, German, Polish, Yiddish. And nobody had to be afraid of the French police, which were really standing at the square, but they were just looking and they couldn't touch us.
French police was there, and we had fun with them because they had the gun bags. They had a gun bag, but no gun in there. What they put in was the mégot, you know, cigarettes. What the Jewish people got from the Italian were smoking. They were ramasser de mégot in French. They say they were picking up the stubs from the cigarettes that the Jews were throwing away and rolling their own cigarette when they have enough stubs. And they couldn't touch us. They could not ask us for paper.
So twice a day, we had to report to the Italian authorities. I had number 428, and I had to give my number in Italian, 428. But that was really for our protection. We didn't mind to have to report to the Italians.
À Saint-Martin-du-Juby, environ 1500 habitants. Avec l'arrivée des Israélites, nous nous sommes trouvés près de 3000 ici tout d'un coup.
Ils étaient plus nombreux que nous, hein. Ils étaient plus nombreux que nous.
On se demandait pourquoi. Puis après, on a appris que c'était parce que ils avaient été chassés d'ailleurs, de l'Allemagne, de plusieurs endroits en France. Alors ils s'étaient réfugiés ici parce qu'avec les Italiens, ils s'entendaient mieux que...
Mais moi, pour moi, les Juifs à Saint-Martin n'ont pas été malheureux, hein. Ça,
Non, tout le monde a...
Non.
Non, on était bien avec eux. Hein.
Moi, je sais qu'à un moment donné, avec une centaine d'Israélites, on allait s'amuser où il y a le terrain de foot maintenant, et là, on jouait comme des fous.
We organized a little boxing club. We had a man there called Charlie. He was a professional boxer at the time.
Charlie Moret, qui était apprenti boulanger chez mon père. Mon père était boulanger et il travaillait chez mon père. Il s'occupait de tous les jeunes juifs d'ici. Il leur faisait faire de la boxe sur les balles de farine. C'était assez extraordinaire.
On avait invité les officiers italiens, on les avait invités. On était nombreux d'ailleurs et on a fait une série de combats.
Avec Charlie Moret, il nous faisait nager, il nous faisait faire de la boxe, il nous occupait aussi.
It was really fun.
Ceux qui étaient riches, ils habitaient les belles villas aux alentours. Et les autres, ils étaient dans le village, dans des appartements.
On avait une partie de la communauté qui était totalement démunie d'argent. Ils n'avaient aucune ressource matérielle. Il existait le joint qui, de Suisse, envoyait des fonds pour permettre à ces gens de pouvoir vivre à peu près normalement.
The Joint is an American Jewish organization created in 1914 that assists European Jews since the rise of Nazism.
Everybody could live and eat. There was enough food for everybody.
La montée des prix, bon, ça a été quelque chose qui était obligatoire, puisque le ravitaillement était difficile.
Though everything was rationed, peasants always had extra potatoes. We didn't drink too much wine. Wine you got almost without tickets because you cannot leave a Frenchman without wine. And so we changed our wine for potatoes or for some eggs or for some butter. We were not hungry.
Vous avez tous les paysans qui étaient par là ont vendu leurs pommes de terre. Le double du prix que de la norme. Alors il y avait des gens qui râlaient, d'autres qui étaient contents.
In the evening, we were sitting on the grass and we were singing. We learned Italian songs, and my sister was singing Gira, gira, biondina, l'amore, la vita, cotera si fa.
On n'était pas en occupation, voilà. On avait l'impression de ne pas l'être.
Well, you were happy to be there. It was a welcome change from the months or years of being chased to be in a place where you felt safe. You didn't know when it would end, but you really didn't give it any thought. You lived day by day.
Quindi era ovvio che queste popolazioni che percepiscono queste résidences assignées come un'oasi fossero alla fine ben contente di rimanerci. e d'altra parte è chiaro che con il minimo sforzo le autorità militari italiane, che avevano altre cose ben più gravi, ben più urgenti a cui pensare, concentrassero i loro sforzi sulla preoccupazione principale, che era combattere il nemico.
J'étais en contact avec la communauté juive. Je suis intervenu à les défendre lorsque, je pense, en juin 1943, un groupe de miliciens de Vichy était venu pour déporter 12 ou 13 des juifs plus éminents. Je suis intervenu avec un soldat et je leur dis, messieurs, vous ici n'avez rien à faire, parce que ici c'est zone italienne, alors vous dérangez tout de suite, mais on va déporter les juifs. Non, 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 vous ne déportez personne. Je vous donne 5 minutes pour déranger. Et dans ce moment, j'ai eu mes soldats qui mettent la balle dans le canon de fusil. Et alors les autres ont regardé et depuis on dit, ah ben, quatre front, et sont partis. Alors j'avais déjà, la communauté juive savait qu'en nous, elle avait des protecteurs.
At Saint-Gervais, Megève and other villages in the Italian zone, there were similar incidents. Harry Berger, interned in a camp in Suspel and 19 years old at the time, testifies.
After 2 months of internment in the camp, one morning we came down to go to breakfast. I already had started to speak Italian at that point, because I was hanging around with the soldiers. And one of them took me aside and says, don't go out now, there's trouble outside. And I peeked out the little window and I saw at the other side of the entrance gate 2 tanks of the SS lined up. 2 trucks, each one had about 20 or 25 SS soldiers on it. They were lined up with machine guns, they had bazookas, they had all kinds of equipment that I never heard of. And they were lined up and they demanded from the Italians to surrender all the Jewish inmates immediately. And of course the Italians said, no, we can't do this. So they lined up their little guys with the little tanks and the little bazookas, and they were so little by comparison, and the others were so frightening, and the Italians were so cute, you know, and they were lined up and they were going to give them a fight. And that the incredible thing happened. It was a standoff for about maybe 20 minutes, and the Nazis packed it up and left.
Les Italiens se sont opposés, on peut dire, par la pression militaire directe à Annecy. En encerclant la caserne de gendarmerie où des Juifs avaient été arrêtés en février 1943. À Paris, il y avait eu un attentat contre 2 officiers de la Luftwaffe et 2000 hommes juifs devaient être arrêtés pour être déportés dans le territoire de l'ancienne zone libre.
We were occupied by the Italians, which was the best thing that ever happened to us.
Ils étaient vraiment gentils.
Let me say one thing about Italians. They were pussycats.
While tens of thousands of Jews find a respite from the war in the Italian zone, elsewhere the destruction of European Jewry, the Holocaust, continues.
Ben, ils avaient la synagogue, je ne me souviens plus du nom de la villa, si c'est les Pervenches ou sur la route du Bourréon.
There was also a Jewish school and the Ort, a Jewish organization involved in professional training.
So, and we could, even they put our art school, can you imagine? So really, I don't know. And I went there because I went to the art school in Nice. And so I wanted to go on in the art school in Saint-Martin. But that was just for a few months that they had to close it.
I mean, we become really friendly with the people of Saint-Martin, and I cannot remember really having a bad time there.
Do you remember a woman called Carmen who worked in the bakery?
Yes.
Tell us about Carmen.
Well, it was she was not a woman, she was a girl our age, and everybody was in love with her. Everybody, you talk Carmen, oh, she's my girlfriend. Ah, she cannot be your girlfriend because she's my girlfriend. I mean, Carmen went around in the population of the teenagers. It was, and I think she was a daughter of the baker, and in this town there's 1 or 2 bakeries, so you could not miss Carmen.
J'étais vendeuse à peine. J'étais pas la propriétaire de la boulangerie. Mais ça fait rien, je pochais des tickets, je leur en donnais à tous.
Elle était sensationnelle, cette fille. Elle nous organisait tout le temps des sorties, des balles. Tout le temps, avec les Juifs et les jeunes d'ici, hein, tous ensemble. Ils allaient danser tout le temps.
Il y avait une grange, ils avaient un phonographe, et ils dansaient ensemble, les jeunes Juifs avec les jeunes de Saint-Martin.
C'était le beau temps, hein. C'était merveilleux. Hein.
Et ils allaient danser le soir avec mon frère,
avec Jacques.
Les amis.
Ah non. Mais il avait 18 ans et moi 20 ans. Hein.
Et c'est aussi grâce à elle que je suis là.
Voilà.
Parce que s'il n'y a pas maman, il n'y a pas moi. Merci Carmen.
Non, c'était le bon temps.
Were your parents worried at all?
My parents were always worried. My dad always was seeing things in the future, you know. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But he said, we are not finished with him until we are finished. Because we don't know, he said always, we don't know what this mamzer has in his head. And this is for the Jews, he will come wherever we are.
Ziggy's father, alas, was right. In Italy, the Allied landings caused the downfall and arrest of Mussolini on July 25th. Marshal Badoglio is appointed head of government, and negotiations are begun between the new government and the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces, General Eisenhower.
Début août 1943, les autorités italiennes préviennent les œuvres juives que l'armistice est imminent et que, on ne sait pas quand d'ailleurs, mais qu'elles vont se retirer.
The Jews are very concerned about their fate.
Mon père s'appelait Federico Strobino. Et c'était un des officiers d'occupation, un des responsables. Il avait fait un petit journal avec des dates.
September 8, 20 hours 30. Finally, the news comes. Italy has asked for an armistice. There is talk about peace without conditions and fighting with the Germans.
L'8 settembre mi trovavo all'Hotel des Alpes. Sentiamo ovviamente la voce registrata di Badoglio.
Il governo italiano, riconosciuta la impossibilità di continuare la impari lotta contro la soverchiante potenza avversaria, ha chiesto un armistizio al generale Eisenhower.
E immediatamente un'esplosione di gioia da parte di tutti. In quel momento ci siamo un comportamento di folle pazzia, di esaltazione generale. Però non sapevamo che cosa fare. Indubbiamente degli ordini precisi non li abbiamo avuti. E dal proclama si capiva soltanto una cosa, che la guerra era finita, che gli anglo-americani non erano più i nostri nemici, che i nostri amici non erano più amici. Cioè, in poche parole, i tedeschi potevano essere in quel momento, da quel momento dei nemici potenziali.
This is General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Commander-in-Chief of the Allied Force. The Italian government has surrendered its armed forces unconditionally.
Riesco a mettermi in contatto col comitato ebraico e organizziamo in qualche modo questa fuga. Ovviamente nel frattempo molti erano già fuggiti attraverso ad altri passi. Comunque nella sera dello stesso giorno riesco a raccogliere ai piedi della salita che poi conduceva, ovviamente che conduce al Colle di Ceriegia, una massa di ebrei che io potrei valutare a circa 400 persone.
September 9, 11 hours, hurried flight, German danger, 21 hours. I returned to St. Martin by car. I warn R of the possibility of fleeing to Italy.
On a le témoignage du lieutenant Strobino qui redescend à Saint-Martin dans la nuit du 9 au 10 septembre pour essayer d'inciter vraiment tous les résidents forcés à les rejoindre soit par fenêtre, soit par cerise.
Strobino knows that the Germans are marching towards Saint-Martin. But what neither he nor the refugees know, communications being cut, is that the Germans have also begun occupying northern and central Italy.
Traverser le col de Cerise, c'est pas facile. Il y avait beaucoup de femmes, des enfants. Même des enfants en bas âge que les soldats ils portaient sur les bras. Et parmi eux, une femme enceinte aussi.
Mais ce que m'a raconté mon père, il n'avait pas de chaussures de montagne. Alors quand on sait pour l'avoir fait, le col des Cerises, la difficulté que ça représente en temps normal, mais alors en hiver, par des gens qui sont mal chaussés, qui ont des enfants à porter, qui ont des femmes enceintes. Donc, difficulté au maximum. Pour des gens qui n'étaient pas entraînés à la marche, qui venaient de passer des bons moments sur Saint-Martin-Vésubie, mais puis 2 jours le lendemain, comme ça, ça a été un exode. Donc, à partir en catastrophe comme ça, c'est horrible.
Ils ont dit suivez-nous, sinon ils vous tueront les Allemands.
We know as long as the Italians were there, we are safe. But we didn't know the Italians will leave so fast.
On nous a dit les Allemands arrivent et les Italiens nous ont dit venez avec nous, on part en Italie, on s'en va. Et comme ils ont dit on s'en va, on les a suivis, on est parti avec eux.
We didn't know how long we're going to go, how far we're going to go. All we know is we wanted to go to Italy. And we thought since the armistice was signed that Italy would be occupied by the Allies.
We were so close to the Italian border, we figured that if you crossed the border, you would find the Allies.
The commandant came out and told everybody that if you want to be safe, I can only tell you, if you want to go over the border, we won't stop you. And the faster, the better.
We thought already freedom. We thought this was the end.
We just followed one or the other. We left Saint-Martin
At a moment's notice, we grabbed whatever we could take and carried it on our backs. And we went on the march. We had no way to know where we were going. We just followed the people in front of us. I was wearing a pair of boots made out of an old pair of shoes. Leather sole was cut off and a wooden sole was put underneath. And it certainly was no way to climb a mountain.
We weren't dressed. We were in sandals. We were in summer clothes. We didn't have anything.
Shoes were torn. Some people had to go barefoot.
We walked, we walked, we walked. The second night, we slept with some Italian soldiers in their barracks, and they made some soup for us. I remember that. And they made a big pot of soup for everybody.
Ho trovato la grande massa dei profughi ebrei. Allora ho dato subito ordine che noi cedessimo alle donne incinte o ai vecchi i nostri posti per dormire e che gli dessimo da mangiare in qualche modo. E allora io in quel momento mi sono trovato in una terribile situazione, perché ho pensato, se in questo momento mi arrivano addosso i tedeschi, io questa gente non l'abbandono. Comunque, per incoraggiare questi, ho piazzato una mitragliatrice sulla strada in modo che loro capissero che io ero pronto a aprire il fuoco contro i tedeschi se arrivavano, no?
Je n'ai jamais vu mon père pleurer, mais là, il y avait des larmes quand il expliquait les femmes enceintes, les enfants qui devaient passer le col par des températures abominables, où il était obligé de leur fabriquer des bottes, attacher des couvertures aux pieds pour qu'ils puissent marcher un peu plus confortablement.
When we were on the highest point and we looked down, it was like a long snake, you know, pulling his way up a hill.
As far as you could see up the mountain was like people walking. And people kept falling back because it was a high climb. And then on the roadside, left baggage and stuff. You know, people just left everything, tried to walk.
And I remember we went down a few times to help people who had children, and it was tough to go.
My grandmother could not make it. She couldn't walk well. So, I mean, you had to walk over the mountains.
It's a treacherous walk. The pathways were very narrow. The stones were falling. We were afraid of an avalanche of stones coming down.
And what I heard also was that people went back. People went back to Saint-Martin. They said, I cannot. Whatever will be, but I cannot climb the mountain.
Some of the refugees turned back, returning to Saint-Martin. Others never left.
Ceux qui étaient restés à Saint-Martin, certains disent « Que voulez-vous que les Allemands ou même les SS nous fassent? On est des vieux, vous croyez qu'ils vont nous molester, etc. On n'est pas un danger pour eux. Hein, on est incapable de tenir un fusil ou autre. » Mais ils n'avaient pas intériorisé des choses que d'autres avaient su et avaient déjà colportées pendant l'été 1943 sur ce qui se passait en Pologne.
Among those who remained in Saint-Martin and the surrounding area, some 40 are arrested and deported by the Germans. They aren't only the elderly.
After we arrived in one place where we could see a village on the bottom, we didn't know if it was Italy. Maybe we ran in circles and we are back in France.
Siggy has in fact arrived in the Piedmont region of Italy, like the majority of refugees who left Saint-Martin.
Naturalmente anche qui abbiamo avuto il triste passaggio delle truppe tedesche. La comunità di Cuneo ha avuto una triste esperienza, l'esperienza di accogliere 1200 ebrei reduci dalla résidence forcée di Saint-Martin-Vésubie e 1200 ebrei sono arrivati nelle nostre valli e precisamente a Borgo San Dalmazzo, 8 chilometri da Cuneo. Su 1200 ebrei sono stati presi e messi in un campo di concentramento 357 ebrei, dei quali sono tornati in 18. Gli altri sono morti ad Auschwitz.
And there followed one of the most intense periods of arrests and deportation of any of Western European history of the final solution. In September 1943, there was this dreadful transformation of the situation when Italy leaves the war.
Ricordo che quella sera d'autunno era umido, piovigginava e siamo stati invasi da circa 900 ebrei, circa, io adesso il numero preciso non lo so.
Quand nous sommes arrivés donc à ce village de Valdieri, il y avait des grandes affiches qu'il fallait immédiatement se présenter.
The Germans had posted notes on the street that all foreigners, they didn't say Jews, had to report in a caserma degli Alpini before a certain time on September 16th, 1943.
Se non si presentavano li avrebbero uccisi e avrebbero anche uccisi coloro che gli davano l'ospitalità.
Ceux qui ont eu la naïveté ou qui étaient épuisés, exténués avec des enfants, des bébés, qui ont fait cette marche, qui n'en pouvaient plus, ils se sont présentés immédiatement. Ils étaient arrêtés et envoyés vers le camp de Borgo San Dalmazzo, où on les a déportés.
Qualcuno ha deciso di andare in giù liberamente. La nostra gente diceva: ma fermatevi, noi vi salviamo. E quelli dicevano: ma no, se noi ci fermiamo qui, non solo portiamo noi le conseguenze dolorose del fermarsi, perché poi arrivano i tedeschi, ma anche voi. E allora hanno deciso di presentarsi in caserma.
We didn't know what to do. We did not want to endanger our hosts, and we finally decided to report to the caserma degli Alpini, which turned out to be a make-up concentration camp.
Dovevo prendermi cura anche di quelli nella caserma, nel campo di concentramento. Andare in caserma veramente avevo un po' paura, anche se ero molto coraggioso, avevo paura di essere arrestato perché ero ricercato.
Da lì arrivavano fondi, carte false, documenti. Lì, nella curia di Genova, periodicamente Don Viale prendeva il treno, partiva da Borgo San Dalmazzo, mettendo a repentaglio la sua esistenza, fare allora un viaggio di quella natura tra Borgo San Dalmazzo e Genova, andava, trovava i fondi, trovava i documenti falsi, ripartiva, ritornava a Borgo e smistava queste cose ai curati, ai parroci di campagna, alle persone con cui aveva stabilito una rete di solidarietà capillare.
E quando l'arcivescovo mi disse di fare un'assistenza morale, io un po' umoristicamente gli ho detto: ma si tratta di ebrei, assistenza morale, quelli avranno fame, quelli non avranno soldi, avranno bisogno di ben altro, anche l'assistenza morale, certo, per tenerli su di spirito.
À Valdieri, nous, tout de suite, la consigne, la forêt, la montagne. Et nous sommes arrivés donc en montant, en pleine nuit, dans une petite grotte où il y avait un couple, des paysans. Et ils nous ont accueillis avec beaucoup de chaleur. Et tout de suite, ils nous ont donné de la soupe pour nous réchauffer. Et ils ont dit, vous pouvez rester ici, on va vous installer dans l'étable. De ma vie, je n'avais pas rencontré autant de pauvreté et autant de misère.
Molte persone locali, e in modo particolare la gente povera delle montagne, hanno aiutato senza condizioni, perché avrebbero potuto venderli, avrebbero potuto farli arrestare. Naturalmente c'è stato quello che ne ha approfittato, che si è fatto pagare per essere nascosto, ma sono tutte cose che si possono capire. Non si capisce e possiamo dirlo senza tema di errore, che ha venduto un ebreo per 5.000 lire d'allora, e quanti casi in Italia ci sono stati, merita merita l'offesa dell'uomo.
For the next 20 months, until the end of the war, Italian and foreign Jews are hunted down and sent to death camps by the Nazis and their fascist allies. Mussolini, released by the Germans, recreates a puppet state under Nazi control in northern Italy, the Republic of Salo. Those who helped the Jews put their lives at stake.
Noi altri siamo andati su, abbiamo trovato quella bambina, era seduta al cono.
Davanti a una baita.
Davanti a una baita, la baita era rotta, non aveva il coperto, non andava più perché il padrone era partito. Noi altri non ci abbiamo parlato, ma abbiamo visto che c'era gente dentro quel casolare, c'era ancora gente, ma noi altri non siamo andati in fuori, siamo subito venuti a prendere da mangiare, perché io ci ho detto a mia sorella, andiamo a prendere un po' da mangiare, questa gente qua hanno fame, era bianca come così. E allora siamo venuti, ci abbiamo portato su. Mamma aveva il pane, ci abbiamo portato su il latte bollito e dopo siamo andati su ma non volevamo che nessuno vedesse tanto perché sa bene.
E avete trovato questa bambina, questa famiglia, chi erano?
Erano ebrei.
Sì, ma quanti erano?
7. E avevamo paura. Aspetta.
E andavamo su tutti i giorni e certe volte di sera andavamo a prendere quella bambina, la portavamo a dormire nella nostra stalla e un giorno sono venuti i tedeschi, si sono scappati. Papà li ha portati una baita vicino a un burrone
la nostra baita, la baita c'è.
Nella baita del mio nonno.
Walter Marx was saved from deportation from the camp at Borgo by Nella Girardot.
This Italian girl that I had befriended in the Cavallo Rosso came to see me twice a week, and during one of her visits she told me that she learned that all the inmates of the camp in Borgo San Dalmazzo had been sent away in cattle cars.
Walter will not meet Nella again until 1998 during the inauguration of a monument in Borgo in honor of the people of the valley who helped the Jews of Saint-Martin. Also present are Enzo Cavaillon and former refugees from Saint-Martin, like Charles Romand.
Mi ricordo anche della giovane figlia di un albergatore di Borgo che veniva a visitarmi all'ospedale di Cuneo 2 o 3 volte alla settimana e che mi ha nascosto dopo la mia uscita dall'ospedale di Cugno, prima di presentarmi ai partigiani della prima divisione alpina, Giustizia e Libertà, Brigata Vallestura, Carlo Roselli.
With the arrival of the Germans in September, Jean-Claude and Cécile Dreimann were each hidden by a gendarme, Officer Magnan and Officer Fougère.
Tu as connu mon père?
Ah oui, j'ai connu ton père, grand, maigre, avec les culottes à la zouave.
Ton père, ta mère.
Ta mère aussi, qui était gentille. Elle avait 5 ans, 6 ans, et lui, il était bébé. Voilà, bébé. Il marchait quand même. Hein. Il marchait quand même, il trottait. Il avait un gros derrière, mais il marchait quand même. Hein. Il était beau comme tout. Que te dire, qu'on te promenait dans la rue, partout, hein, comme tous les enfants, et que tu devais dire maman à ma mère, pour pas qu'on se fasse attraper. Et ça, c'était très difficile. Voilà, c'était ça, votre maison. Là, on rentrait à cette porte, je crois.
La première porte?
Voilà. Ton père avait pris des photos, là, dans ce petit jardin, là, dans cette allée. Voilà.
Comme si c'était hier.
Oui, même le grillage, il doit être d'époque, sans doute.
Là, il y a le mur. La
Ça,
seule photo
voilà.
que j'ai, et ça, je sais que c'était pris, et je peux te dire tout de suite en quelle année, c'est marqué derrière, c'était pris en mai 43.
Eh ben
Donc,
voilà.
juin,
Parce qu'on est arrivé
juillet,
en
août,
printemps.
septembre,
Voilà,
c'est 4
voilà.
mois avant qu'il y ait
Ça-
ce fameux jour. ce
Voilà,
triste jour.
voilà. Alors, quand Madame Dreimann est partie un soir dans la montagne, avant de partir, elle a apporté à la maison ses 2 enfants. Cécile est restée chez nous et avant de fermer, elle lui a donné une paire de boucles d'oreilles pour moi, toute petite. Et je voudrais que la boucle soit bouclée et que ce soit Jean-Claude qui les prenne, voilà, ou Cécile, voilà. Elles sont pour vous, ça vient de votre mère et je les ai toujours gardées. Et je vous les donne volontiers parce que je trouve que c'est un cycle qui se ferme. Parce que je vous croyais tellement tous morts. J'ai décidé ça le jour où j'ai su que vous étiez vivant. Pleure pas. Allez.
Ici, 1 millier de Juifs, hommes, femmes, enfants, vieillards, aidés par les organisations juives, protégés par l'armée italienne d'occupation, ont connu un répit jusqu'au 8 septembre 1943, jour où s'est déchaînée la haine raciale de l'occupant allemand.
Amongst the motivations for this film are these few words inscribed on this monument. Words that honor an army of occupation. Words that are unique. A question remains, however. Were the intentions of the Italian army purely humanistic when we know that the Jews were persecuted in Italy starting in 1938 and that atrocities were committed by Italian fascist armies in Ethiopia, in Yugoslavia and elsewhere against partisans and civilian populations?
Lorsque Ribbentrop est intervenu auprès de Mussolini pour lui faire des reproches en ce qui concernait la protection que les Italiens accordaient aux Juifs, eh bien, Mussolini a répondu c'est la faute de mes généraux, ils ont reçu une éducation humaniste et chrétienne.
I vertici militari italiani non avevano minimamente l'intenzione di organizzare politiche di salvataggio umanitario degli ebrei. Ciò non significa che essi consegnarono.
Non c'è mai stata una riunione in cui i comandanti e le autorità italiane predisponessero un piano di salvataggio. Non era neanche possibile immaginarlo. È realistico farlo. È esistito un atteggiamento genericamente ben disposto.
Atti di militari italiani, decisioni coraggiose di alcuni militari italiani furono prese. Ma un discorso è parlare di atti individuali che possono tranquillamente essere anche considerati come atti di resistenza. Sono indubbi, ma da lì a pensare che atti individuali di resistenza diventino atti politici di un regime antisemita, su questo punto sono in assoluto disaccordo.
It was a complex and difficult situation, this administration of the Italian occupation zone in southeastern France. Because the Vichy regime still had some kinds of jurisdiction as long as they didn't do anything that contradicted what the Italian occupying forces wanted. Meanwhile, the Germans were just across the Rhone River and watching every move and hoping that Jews would come across, that they could deport the Jews who were under Italian control. The Vichy authorities in southeastern France also wanted to deport those foreign Jews in the Italian zone. And that was primarily because they had promised to deliver certain numbers of Jews to the Germans.
Le autorità francesi, per dimostrare che essi avevano completa autorità nei territori francesi, nei territori metropolitani e in Corsica, e che quindi l'autorità degli italiani era nulla. E quando potevano scavalcavano le autorità italiane prendendo direttamente accordi con i tedeschi. Questo secondo fatto, sia per le autorità politiche a Roma, per Mussolini e per le autorità del Ministero degli Affari Esteri, eccetera, a Roma, sia per le autorità militari in Francia metropolitana, era qualcosa di assolutamente inaccettabile, perché se si fossero piegati a questa logica avrebbero perso proprio la loro autorità nei confronti delle popolazioni occupate e quindi mantenere l'ordine e la sicurezza nei territori militarmente occupati sarebbe diventato assolutamente impossibile.
The war was winding down. It appeared that the Germans and their Italian allies were not going to win the war. Italian diplomats and military personnel didn't want to have the burden of the deportations on their record, not just their consciences, but on their actual career records. They knew by this time what deportation meant, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it.
If the reasons for the behavior of the Italians are complex, and humanistic considerations were probably not their only motivation, they have shown that resistance is always possible, even when the pressure is applied by a powerful Nazi ally and the Vichy government. That resistance is possible was also demonstrated by the thousands of anonymous people who, often risking their lives, came to the aid of the hunted Jews. My family was among those hunted Jews. They left Belgium trying to reach safety in Switzerland. Arrested by French gendarmes and sent to a French concentration camp, they somehow managed to reach Saint-Martin and then follow the Italian troops. I was 3 months old. This story, therefore, has accompanied me all my life, as well as the benevolence of the Italians on both sides of the Alps. Thanks to this benevolence, I was able to participate in the Memorial March 65 years later.